What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video, and this one we're going to take a look at the best FPL forwards, and we're going to try and cover every single price point. If you do end up enjoying this video and you want to see it from midfielders, defenders and goalkeepers as well, make sure to give the video a like and hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. And if you have been putting your drafts together and you want to get them rated, use the My Team tool on Fantasy Football Hub. It's completely free to get your team rating. There's a link in the description below, and if you want to sign up to any of the memberships at the moment, there's up to 50% off. Again, all links you need in the description below. So we'll start off with the premiums, and there's really not that much more to say about Erling Haaland. He's absolutely incredible, and I can't think of a single reason why he wouldn't be in your FPL squad. So I'm just going to literally leave it at that. When it comes to Harry Kane, we often get situations in FPL where there is a great player that you know is going to score plenty of points, but they just don't really fit into the current kind of FPL meta, if you want to call it that. And if you think about the way that everyone's setting up their squads right now, they don't really have room for a 12.5 million forward. So if you're asking me if Kane's going to get 200 plus points if he stays at Spurs, it's probably very likely. Whether or not he's going to hit the highs he did last year, I'm not so sure about that. But in terms of game week 1 squads, I think it is difficult to fit him in. The only plus I can see over having someone like Mo Salah, if you're going to go for a second premium, is pairing Kane with a cheap midfielder might be easier than pairing Salah with a cheap forward. As we're going to discuss later on, when you start getting down to 6 million or below, it's hard to find an out-and-out great forward. So from that perspective, Kane might be good, but I just think for 12.5 million, it's too much. And obviously, there's lots of talk that he might go to Bayern Munich as well. Also, if you're spending that much, you probably want to captain him. And when you compare the fixtures of these two players, the only week where I think you could go Kane over Haaland is game week 5, when he has Sheffield United at home and Haaland has West Ham away. But everybody knows Haaland is still a great option for that fixture. So having all that extra budget used for one fixture in the first 6 game weeks, I just don't think it's worth it. So if you're going to go for an £8 million forward, I do think that Gabriel Jesus is a slightly better option in game week 1 than both Ollie Watkins and Callum Wilson. You can see there that they've all got pretty good expected goal involvement numbers. The ones on screen are per 90 minutes from last year. So 0.87 for Jesus, 0.65 for Watkins, and 0.89 for Callum Wilson. If I was playing devil's advocate for reasons to go for Watkins or Wilson instead, I guess both of them are first choice penalty taker for their clubs. There is a chance that Tielemans might take them off Watkins because his record isn't great. But right now, we know that Watkins and Wilson, unless it changes, are first choice penalty takers. You'd probably say that Watkins' minutes are slightly more secured than the other two as well. I think for what it's worth, when fit, all 3 of those will start regularly. But Ollie Watkins is less likely to be subbed off. With Jesus, you got Nketiah, you got Trossard, you got Havertz. All 3 of those players could play up front. And with Wilson, you've obviously got competition from Isak. They could play together. But if one of them's going to come off first, it's probably going to be Callum Wilson. But even with the penalties and maybe slightly better minutes for Watkins, once you look at those fixtures, I just don't see how you can't go for Jesus, really. Like, the 2 toughest games for Arsenal are Man United and Spurs, both at home. Whereas for Villa, they got Newcastle away, Liverpool away, and Chelsea away in the first 6. And for Newcastle, we know they've got that little bad period between game weeks 2 and 3, where they got Man City away, Liverpool at home, and Brighton away. Now, to be fair, if Callum Wilson could keep up with points for the first 4 game weeks, he's probably a slightly better longer term option if he can stay fit, if he's always playing in that number 9 role. But like I said, he does have competition from Isak, so it's not even a guarantee that Wilson would definitely start all of those games. So for me, it's Gabriel Jesus from the start. Later on in the season, I'm sure we'll be changing through these quite a lot. So just wanted to say that I have partnered with Fantasy Football Hub for the 2023-24 season, which you've probably already seen. If you haven't already checked them out, there is a link at the top of the description to use the My Team tool. That will give you a team rating for your current draft. And the best thing is, that's absolutely free. If you want to use some of the other features, then there is kind of memberships you can sign up for. And at the moment, there's up to 50% off. And if you do sign up for one of their memberships and you don't win your mini league, they will give you your money back. There's terms and conditions that apply for that. All the links for that are also in the description below. But as part of the membership, there's loads on offer that can help you do better at FPL. All the Opta stats, the points projections, fixture analyzers, loads of articles and stuff like that. So if you haven't already checked them out, make sure you do. All the links you need are in the description below. So I do wonder if I'm pushing Nkunku on the channel a little bit more than he deserves. I'm not saying he's essential or anything like that. But to be honest, as it stands, I do think he is the best 7.5 million option. That might change over pre-season, but I think things are looking pretty good right now. Obviously with Chelsea there are a few question marks, but they got a decent manager at the helm now, pretty good fixtures especially from game week 3 onwards, no Europe to contend with. You look at Nkunku's numbers from last year, 0.74 expected goal involvement, even if that's going to go down a little bit, transitioning from Bundesliga to Premier League, they're still extremely good numbers. Loads of goals and assists last year. Probably going to take penalties as well. And I think when you look at the other signings and players they've got, there might be a few more question marks over minutes. I think Nkunku's going to be pretty much nailed. So I am quite excited about him if you're going to spend 7.5 million. There are other options there. Mitrovic is one, although there are rumours that he wants to leave the club. Apparently an offer has come in from the Saudi leagues. I think it got turned down, but Mitrovic is not necessarily happy about that. We'll have to wait and see what happens. I guess with him, if he is at Fulham, you know exactly what you're getting, right? He's going to be nailed on again. He's going to be on penalties. He's going to play pretty much 90 minutes every single game. I guess game week 3 and 4 for Fulham aren't great. Arsenal away and Man City away. But either side of that, you got Everton away, Brentford at home, Luton at home, Crystal Palace away. So it could be worse. And I think if he was at Fulham in game week 1, like at the start of the season, you'd probably say he's a more safe pick than maybe someone like Nkunku. But I think for the excitement factor, I would definitely go for the Chelsea man, especially from game week 3 onwards. With Isak, I think it's just similar to Callum Wilson. There's competition there for the number 9 spot. If they do play together, it's very likely that Isak will be the one on the left. I don't quite like him as much there. And then you've got those fixtures, Man City away, Liverpool at home, Brighton away. He's a quality player, and when Wilson's not on the pitch, he would also take penalties as well. But I just don't think I can start him for game week 1. Just quickly looking at the other options at that price point, you've obviously got Darwin Nunez and Cody Gakpo at Liverpool. I think whichever one of those two gets regular minutes is fantastic. If Darwin Nunez was nailed for the first 6 game weeks, he would be the best option, the one that I would go for in this price bracket. But I don't think any of us can say that right now. There's just too much competition for those Liverpool attacking spots. So that's why I've not included them on the list. So for me, it's Nkunku at the top. Would you go for Mitrovic or Isak instead? Let me know in the comments below. Look, I'm sorry, Nicholas Jackson. I've got to be real with you. You're the only £7 million forward worth talking about. That's why you're all alone on screen. The only other forward that FPL priced at 7 million was also at Chelsea, and that was Lukaku, and I'd be very surprised if he's there next season. Whether or not Jackson is going to be an option, we're going to have to wait and see how pre-season goes and how Pochettino sets Chelsea up. All the talk I've seen around Nkunku is that he could play number 9, he could play as a number 10, he could play off a striker. Obviously, if he does play off another forward or plays as a 10, then there is a room for a number 9 like Jackson or possibly Broja, because I would expect Aubameyang and Lukaku to probably leave the club. So at 7 million, he could be great, but I think it's very hard to call that right now. And it might be that Pochettino changes things up game to game. So maybe he starts with the number 9 in one game. Perhaps Nkunku plays that kind of role the next game. So I just think for 0.5 million less, it might not be worth that for game week 1. For 0.5 extra, I think Nkunku's minutes will definitely be better, and he'll probably be on penalties as well. I think with Chelsea in particular, a bit like Spurs, I really want to see them in pre-season. I'm happy to have my mind changed. I'm open-minded like that. And for 7 million for a Chelsea striker, there is definitely potential value there. 0.64 expected goal involvement in La Liga last year. Few goals as well. We know that fixture turn from game week 3. So I'm kind of semi-interested in him. But I think if I'm going for a Chelsea forward, I'd probably just buy Nkunku. So 6.5 million forwards isn't a price point that I particularly like in FPL, not for game week 1 anyway. I'm sure we'll be looking at some of these players later on down the line, but I can't see me starting with any of them, with one exception, and that is Alvarez. If he looks like he's going to get good minutes early on, then I'll almost certainly have him in my side, just like everyone else will, because he's only 6.5 million, great underlying numbers, he plays for a Man City team that score lots of goals, and the opening fixtures are great. There is a possibility he does get those good minutes early on, because if De Bruyne is injured and Bernardo Silva's playing on the right, then you've got kind of Alvarez, Foden and Kovacic who are most likely to play the 8 roles. So obviously 2 of those players have got to play, and Kovacic is kind of new to the team. So then maybe it would be Alvarez and Foden, but that is not a guarantee. That's why I've put him below Solanke and Awani, because his minutes just aren't quite as good. Obviously, if something happens like Haaland gets an injury, then every single person in FPL pretty much is going to buy Alvarez. But unless we're sure about those minutes, I just don't see how I can start with him. I think with Solanke, he was a great price this year. 6.5 million feels a bit expensive for game week 1. Obviously, he's nailed on. His underlying numbers did go up towards the end of the season. He's on penalties as well. But Bournemouth have got to play Liverpool, Spurs, Chelsea and Brighton in the opening 6 game weeks. And the other 2 games are West Ham at home and Brentford away. It's not ideal. Awani, I think, especially towards the end of the season, started delivering on some of the promise that people talked about at the beginning of the season. And so I do like him as an option. 0.54 expected goal involvement. Decent enough. But Forest's opening fixtures are awful. They've got Arsenal away, Man United away, Chelsea away and Man City away in the opening 6 games. Now, to be fair, the other 2 fixtures are great. It's either awful or great for Nottingham Forest in the first 6, but I just don't see how you can start with someone like that. If we look a bit longer term than that, after game week 6, you got Brentford at home, Palace away, Luton at home. That's a little bit better, but then even then it's Liverpool away. So I'm just not that keen on starting with any of these players straight away. And at that price point, the only other 2 are Aubameyang. Not sure he's going to be at Chelsea next season. And then Martial, who's always injured. And I think if you're going to fill up Man United spots, then you've got Fernandes, Rashford, Onana, who should arrive soon, Luke Shaw, maybe even Mason Mount if he's playing a bit more advanced. I'm just not sure there's room to have an injury-prone Martial up front. So for 6.5, I can't see me starting with any of these players in game week 1 unless Alvarez is nailed. So for game week 1, I actually think that the £6 million forwards are probably better than the 6.5s. And with everything we know right now, I'd probably put Wissa as the best option. His underlying numbers are pretty respectable, 0.44 expected goal involvement per 90. Outside of a couple of game weeks, Brentford's fixtures are pretty good right up until about game weeks 9 or 10. And with no Tony available, Wissa should be pretty much nailed. Now, obviously, the transfer window is open for a little while yet. Brentford may well sign another forward. That could muddy the waters a little bit. But right now, his minutes look like they're going to be pretty good, along with Mbommo as well. But obviously, he's 0.5 million less, and he takes up a forward slot, which are a little bit harder to fill. I know some people have speculated that Wissa might be on penalties, but I'm pretty sure that's going to be Mbommo. But let's wait and see if we get any indication throughout pre-season. I've put Ferguson second because in terms of underlying numbers, he's one of the best at this price point, 0.62 per 90 minutes. It is worth saying he very rarely gets to 90 minutes. I think it only happened once in the league last year. I know he's another year older now, more experience, etc. I still think he's probably going to be managed, not necessarily straight away because there's no cup competitions and stuff like that. But once Europa League starts, I'm not sure that Ferguson's going to be playing week in, week out. That's the thing that worries me. And it's not even just that. They got so many options, right? Even if you think João Pedro is going to play as a number 10 or off the left or something like that, you've still got Undav and Welbeck that can also play number 9. Ferguson might be the best of the lot. It doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to play every single week. So for the first few game weeks, he's probably going to be pretty decent. After that, I do just worry. And also, Brighton's fixtures, if you have a quick look at them, and look, they're a great attack, so you probably shouldn't worry too much. First 3, not bad. Luton at home, Wolves away, West Ham at home. After that, it's Newcastle, Man United. Bournemouth is pretty good, but then it's Villa away, Liverpool at home, Man City away. So for the long run, they're not even that great fixture-wise anyway. So I don't know. I'm always a little bit wary about whether I've got it wrong, because I'm not that keen on Ferguson. A lot of people are. But I've put him second because I just think Calvert-Lewin's injuries right now are a bit of a concern. Obviously, we're still in pre-season. We'll have to wait and see what's going to happen. But we did see one of the coaches talk about him, how they want to get him fit. It's not about a rush to get him ready for game week 1. They want to make sure he's properly ready for a run in the side. So he's not even guaranteed to be available for game week 1. If he is, I think given past performances, and we are talking like 2-3 seasons ago now, and the fixtures Everton have got, and the fact he'd be on penalties, he'd probably be my number 1 choice. But right now, I'm far too worried to kind of put him at the top. So I'm going to go for Wissa. In terms of the other players at this price point, you've got Welbeck also at Brighton, but I just think Ferguson will be ahead of him in the pecking order. And then you've got the 3 West Ham players, Antonio, Ings and Scamacca. I'd be surprised if all 3 are at the club next year. Maybe Antonio will go, I don't know. Lots of people are saying that Scamacca might be first choice. So for 6 million, he could be a pretty good option. But I'd want to know for sure that he's first choice. And I'd probably want to wait until they have better fixtures. If you look at the first 6, Chelsea at home, Brighton away, Man City at home and Liverpool away. Other 2 games are Bournemouth and Luton away, which are decent enough. But there's too many bad fixtures in there for me from West Ham. So if I'm going to go for a 6 million right now, it's Wissa. But I could easily be persuaded to go for Ferguson or Calvert-Lewin instead. So I think for forwards, once you get to 5.5 million or below, there's a lot more question marks about exactly who the best option is. So I'm going to try and cover as many players as possible. For the 5.5s in particular, I've got Morris at Luton, João Pedro who's now at Brighton, and then the Sheffield United striker, and I think you say his name, NDIA? Something similar to that? Have I got it right? Have I got it wrong? Let me know in the comments below. Before Luton's fixture against Burnley in Game Week 2 was postponed, I think Morris probably was the standout 5.5 because he's one of the only players you can guarantee minutes from, and he's probably on penalties as well. I've seen some people speculate that might not be the case, but I think he probably is. Again, Luton fans, if that's wrong, let me know in the comments below. I mean, they're probably not going to get that many, but it's still something nice to have in your locker. With that postponement in Game Week 2, it is frustrating because in the first 3 game weeks, it's now Brighton away, blank, Chelsea away, which isn't great. You could bench him, of course, as well if you've got someone to come on instead, especially like a cheap defender. A lot of people are going to put Rico Henry on their bench, for example. So it's not a deal breaker. And I think if he is one of the only players you can guarantee minutes from, he's probably worth looking at if you've only got 5.5 million to spend. But it is a bit annoying he doesn't play in Game Week 2. With João Pedro, with the fixtures that Brighton have got and the amount of goals they score, I think a lot of people will jump on him if the minutes are good. I just don't know how we can guarantee that right now. I've seen some people say that, you know, they spent a good amount of money on him, so he's going to be nailed on. But Premier League teams have got so much money these days, I don't think that matters a huge amount. And obviously, we don't know what position he's going to play. If he plays as a number 9, well, you've got Ferguson, Welbeck, Undav. If he plays as number 10 and Ciso can play there as well, some people have speculated he might play off the left. But then you've got Matoma, who was fantastic last season. I guess if he can be used in multiple roles, maybe that's a good thing. But there's so much competition, it's just really hard to say. So if he's nailed on for 5.5 million, a lot of people will go to him as the forward to have at that price. But I just think it's too hard to say right now. We're going to have to wait and see what happens in pre-season. I think with NDIA, have I got that right? Probably not. I watched a YouTube video before I started recording to try and get it correct. There are rumours that he might transfer out of Sheffield United, so that's something to keep an eye on. If he is at the club in Game Week 1, the opening 4 fixtures outside of Man City at home aren't that bad. They don't have a blank or anything like that, and his underlying numbers compared to Morris were pretty comparable. Did score quite a few goals and assists last year as well. So I think because of the blank, if I had to play that player every week, he might be the one that I would go to. If you look at the other options at 5.5, Nketiah is not going to get much game time while Jesus is fit, and they've got loads of players that can play in that number 9 role. Undav is a similar situation to Welbeck, Ferguson, João Pedro. So much competition. Maybe one of the Burnley forwards, Jay Rodriguez or obviously Wout Weghorst. I think given how Weghorst did for Man United last year, a lot of people would probably be put off going for him. I think Jay Rodriguez is also penalty taker for Burnley, so if he's going to get regular minutes, maybe you look at him. But obviously you've got a similar situation to Morris, that they don't play in Game Week 1. So first 4 fixtures are now Man City at home, blank, Villa at home and Spurs at home. It's not necessarily great. I guess 3 home games in 4 is not bad, but it's not something I would kind of get too excited about. Edouard at Crystal Palace, not nailed on, doesn't start every single game. You got McBurney at Sheffield United as well. And then I guess talked a lot about seeing what happens in pre-season with Spurs and Chelsea, but maybe for some of the other teams, it'd be nice to know for Wolves who's going to be first choice forward there. They got quite a few options, Fabio Silva, Jimenez as well, and there's a few fives that we're going to talk about in a minute. So I think as it stands, Morris is probably the best option even with the blank. João Pedro possibly because he plays for such a good team, but like I said, 5.5s, there's a lot of question marks with them. So I'm going to end with the £5 million forwards because at the time we're recording, we can't guarantee minutes for any of the 4.5s, and if that does change, I'll just cover it in other videos anyway. I know that people are hopeful that Balogun will move from Arsenal to another Premier League club, but that isn't guaranteed, so I'm just going to stick to the £5 million players. The one most likely to get minutes is probably Adebayo at Luton. As long as they continue to play with 2 up front, him and Morris should be that too. His underlying numbers are pretty comparable. He obviously cost 0.5 million less. I think the blank in Game Week 2 is less of an issue because anyone looking at a £5 million forward is probably for the bench, not to play every single week, and it's probably for those on a 4-4-2 formation that want a little bit of extra security on the bench because they're also going to have a cheap midfielder. I think if you're playing a 3-5-2, you're going to have 2 defenders on the bench, so having that 4.5 million dud isn't so much of an issue. So Adebayo for minutes looks pretty good. I wouldn't massively worry about the blank for him. With Vinicius, that obviously all depends on Mitrovic. Like I've already mentioned, there are rumours that he wants to leave. Whether or not Fulham will let that happen, whether or not it's true, we'll have to wait and see. But if he does go and they don't sign anyone else, Vinicius would surely then become first choice. His underlying numbers are not that exciting, But last year, when Mitrovic was suspended and Vinicius was playing more regularly, he did start to look a little bit better. And again, this would just be a player for the bench for the most part. So if he was nailed on to get minutes, he would then look like an excellent option and definitely someone that I would think about. It would maybe even be enough for me to kind of start thinking about possibly going to a different formation. Morpay is similar to Vinicius, where he's only really going to get minutes if someone else isn't playing. And that is, of course, Calvert-Lewin. I've already mentioned that he might have injury concerns and stuff like that. If he's not available, the only other out-and-out number 9 they have, I think, is Morpay, because Sims has gone now as well. That being said, Demarai Gray has been used in that position. So even if Calvert-Lewin is out, it wouldn't guarantee Morpay minutes. So I'd have to see him playing regularly in pre-season to even think about that. So that's just one if Calvert-Lewin is maybe out for a while. In terms of other options at this price point, the few that I've seen people mention is Broja at Chelsea. What if he's first choice number 9 ahead of Jackson if Nkunku's playing in a different position? If he is, everyone's going to go out and buy him. He would be an absolutely ridiculous price. We'll have to wait and see what happens at Chelsea. Players like kind of Mateta, they're not necessarily nailed on. Similar with Edouard. They do, like, sometimes they'll play like a couple of games in a row, then they'll miss one out or they'll come off early. So I'm a little bit worried about Crystal Palace forwards. But if one of them was nailed, given the amount of goals they scored when Roy Hodgson came in, that would be worth looking at. And the other one, if I can find him here, is Klajdzic at Wolves. Now, he came to them last year and had a really bad injury, so didn't play, and he is coming back from that injury now. The problem is it was a terrible injury. I think it was an ACL or something like that. So even if he's back, surely they're going to manage him. And obviously we don't know who's first choice Wolves striker yet, but before he came to Wolves, he did have a pretty good record. So I think there is excitement is probably the wrong word, but if he does end up being first choice and he does kind of prove his fitness and the injury's not looking that bad or anything like that, or the recovery from the injury, then for 5 million he could be a good option as well. Again, the fixtures are not fantastic for Wolves. They've got Man United, Brighton, Liverpool and Man City in the first 7. But we go back to that point that this is a £5 million forward to mostly sit on your bench. So right now, at the time of recording, the one I would probably go for is Adebayo. But keep an eye on Mitrovic. Keep an eye on what happens with the Wolves situation. That might be worth spending 0.5 million more rather than having a 4.5 million dud. If there's any forwards I've missed out that you think were worth mentioning, let me know down in the comments below. Give it a like if you enjoyed it. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. And check out those links to Fantasy Football Hub in the description below.